She parked on her own driveway, Celeste, not a crime. That's what I said, loud enough for the neighbors to hear, but not loud enough to spark a war. Not yet. I was still playing nice then. Figured common sense might work. I should have known better. I'm Mark Ralston, son of Daniel Ralston, a retired U.S. Marshal who spent his life standing between people and the chaos they bring. We moved back into this house after my mother passed, thought we'd finally find some peace. Instead, we got Celeste Hardwick and her clipboard of tyranny. Before I get into how this got way out of hand, I want to know something. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. Let's see who else has been through HOA hell, and if this hits a nerve, tap subscribe, because trust me, it's only just getting started. This house, it's not just a property. It's where my mom used to sit on the old stone bench under the oak tree every morning with her tea. That tree still drops acorns on the tin roof of the shed, and every time it does, it's like hearing her laugh again. That bench, it's still got her initials carved into the side from high school. We weren't just trying to keep a roof over our heads. We were holding on to what little was left of her. But Celeste doesn't care about that. Our first week back, I fixed the mailbox, trimmed the lawn, and repainted the fence. We kept to ourselves. Then, one morning, a neon pink slip showed up on the door. Vehicle violation, side tire over sidewalk line. It wasn't even Daniel's truck. It was mine. Parked 12 inches too far forward, apparently. I crumpled the notice and tossed it in the trash. Daniel didn't say a word, just raised one eyebrow and went back to his crossword. But 3 days later, another notice, then another. Then came a letter citing unauthorized structure modifications to the back shed. My mother's shed. The same one with her gardening tools, her handwritten seed labels, and a worn yellow glove she never let go of. Celeste called it an eyesore. Daniel walked out to meet her when she came by again. He stood quiet on the porch while she recited some rule number from a book she probably wrote herself. "You're going to have to repaint that shed," she snapped, not even looking at him. "It doesn't match the community color palette." Daniel took a slow breath. "This shed's been here longer than the HOA charter. Longer than you, even." "Well, rules evolve. You don't want to start your return off the wrong foot." Daniel stepped down one stair, slow. He doesn't talk much, but when he does, people tend to listen. "You ever enforce those rules with a loaded weapon, Miss Hardwick?" Celeste's smirk cracked, just slightly. She thought he was joking. I didn't. Back inside, I asked him if he was going to say more. "Not yet," he said. "This ain't a shootout, not unless they kick in the door." See, my father doesn't bluff. He's the type who walks through a room and the energy shifts, even if he's holding nothing but a cup of black coffee. People like Celeste, they only understand loud. My dad, he's a whisper that clears the room. But that week, she escalated. She started knocking on neighbors' doors, showing them photos of our backyard, saying we were violating Ordinance 14B, whatever that meant. Someone started filming from a drone over our property. That's when I knew this wasn't about rules, it was about control. Still, Daniel stayed quiet. But me, I started paying attention, logging everything. Date, time, violation, person. I started acting less like a homeowner and more like I used to, back when I was a private investigator in Atlanta. You don't ignore a pattern like that. The bench under the oak, the same one my mom loved, it started to feel like the only sane place on the property. Every morning I'd sit there, coffee in hand, watching Celeste's goons drive by, clipboards at the ready. I could feel her waiting for one wrong move. But I wasn't planning on making a mistake. I was planning something else entirely. By the end of that second week, I had a folder on my desk labeled Cell 1. Inside it were photos, timestamps, printed emails, and a handwritten map of every odd visit, every vehicle pass, and every violation posted on our door. It looked more like a criminal surveillance file than a neighborhood problem, except the criminal wore perfume and carried a clipboard. And the warnings weren't stopping. One morning, I stepped outside to find a plastic bag zip-tied to our gate. Inside, a laminated HOA violation notice that simply read, "Shed identified as unsafe structure. Demolition recommended within 14 days." Demolition. For a shed that had survived 3 hurricanes, 2 snowstorms, and held my mother's last batch of tulip bulbs. I looked over at Dad sitting by the oak tree, sipping his coffee. He didn't even glance at the paper, just said, "They always try fear first, then force. Then they slip up." That day, I started digging deeper. I found the HOA charter online, a bloated 87-page PDF that read like a mashup of law school dropouts and retired suburban dictators. But buried in the fine print, a clause. Article 12, Section C, stating that structures built prior to the HOA's incorporation were grandfathered in. In plain terms, they had no right to touch that shed. So why the sudden pressure? Celeste wasn't trying to enforce the rules. She was trying to break us down. That afternoon, I took photos of the shed from every angle, documented the foundation age, and scanned in the original property permit. Then I walked over to Nina Wheeler's house. HOA treasurer, quiet type, the one who always looked like she wanted to be anywhere else but the meetings. She opened the door halfway, eyes darted past my shoulder like she expected someone else to be watching. "I just need to ask a question," I said, "about Article 12. About the shed." She swallowed, hard. "You'll have to speak with Celeste. I can't." "I'm just the treasurer." "But you were friends with my mom, weren't you?" Nina's eyes locked onto mine, and for a second, I saw it. Guilt. Or fear. Maybe both. She said nothing, just shut the door. Later that week, I found Celeste in our front yard, measuring the distance between our mailbox and the curb with a laser tool. I stepped out onto the porch, slow, arms crossed. "Can I help you with something, or are we surveying for a runway now?" She didn't look up. "Your mailbox is 2.4 inches off regulation height. That's a citation. Must be a slow crime day in the suburbs." She straightened up, sunglasses flashing. "Sarcasm won't stop the violations, Mr. Ralston. I suggest you start complying. Your father's history won't protect you here." And there it was, the slip-up. I didn't bite, just nodded, went inside and typed that quote into my log. She knew. She had run background on my father. I was done being passive. So I called Eli Granger, one of the oldest neighbors on the street. He'd been slapped with a fine for putting in a tool shed last year, one that he'd later dismantled himself just to avoid further fees. "Thought I'd built it too close to the fence," he muttered over the phone. "Turns out the fence wasn't even mine, was HOA's, built on my line. Took me 6 months to prove it." He offered to bring over some paperwork, copies of his appeal, and the original plat map. When he showed up, he looked around nervously. "I shouldn't be seen here. Celeste doesn't like us comparing notes." "You think she's hiding something?" "I think she's trying to make sure no one looks long enough to find out." Meanwhile, Dad spent most mornings under the oak, silent, but I could tell he was watching, not just Celeste, but how I moved, how I planned. One afternoon, he handed me a folded piece of paper. On it, his own timeline, with notes, details I hadn't even caught. "You're not the only one who knows how to build a case," he said. "Just make sure you know what you're walking into." That night, I found another notice, this one pinned to our front gate with a knife. No name, just the words, "Back off." I took it inside, added it to cell 1, and began planning my next move. The notice pinned with a knife stayed in my folder for exactly 2 hours before I made a decision. If Celeste wanted to play intimidation games, then I'd bring the fight where she felt safest, her precious HOA board meeting. The monthly gathering was held in the Community Rec Center, a beige box of a building with flickering fluorescent lights and a stale coffee machine that hadn't worked since 2014. I walked in 5 minutes early, file folder under one arm, recorder in my shirt pocket, and a calm expression that belied how fast my brain was ticking. Celeste was already seated at the front table, wearing her usual stiff blazer and a pearl necklace that somehow made her smirk more condescending. Nina Wheeler sat beside her, flipping through papers with fingers that trembled slightly, just like they had when I asked her about my mom last week. I took a seat in the back row. No one greeted me. Eyes flicked in my direction like I was a kid who brought a loaded slingshot to a PTA meeting. I didn't care. I wasn't there to be liked. Celeste opened with her usual spiel. "As president of the Whispering Pines HOA, I call this meeting to order. Please refer to the agenda in front of you. First up, continued enforcement efforts for non-compliant properties. Translation, more punishment." One by one, they reviewed code violations. A woman was fined for wind chimes deemed excessively loud. A man was warned for leaving a kayak on the side of his garage, visible from the road, apparently. Same pattern: nitpick, isolate, control. Then came our address. Item 7, Celeste said, adjusting her glasses. Unapproved modifications to the Ralston property, specifically the rear structure classified as an illegal utility shed. I raised my hand. She ignored me. I'd like to speak on that. You're not on the agenda, Mr. Ralston, she replied flatly. I wasn't on the eviction list either until you invented it last month. You can afford 5 minutes. Celeste huffed but nodded. 2 minutes. I stood. That shed was built in 1986. It predates this HOA by a full decade, and under Article 12, Section C, it's legally protected. I've got the original property permits and a notarized statement from the county inspector who signed off on it. Celeste leaned back. We'll need time to verify the authenticity of... You had time. You just didn't expect me to bring receipts. That stirred a murmur from the small crowd. Even Nina looked up briefly, eyes wide, then quickly lowered again. Her pen slipped from her hand. Celeste, unfazed, moved on. Thank you, Mr. Ralston. Noted. However, we reserve the right to issue temporary enforcement actions pending legal review. Temporary enforcement, I scoffed, like the time you threatened Eli Granger with removal of his garden because of unsanctioned flora? You keep calling it order, I call it harassment. Celeste's jaw tensed, but she said nothing. That silence told me I had her attention, just not her approval. The meeting moved forward, but I wasn't done watching. I shifted focus to Nina. Her hands shook every time Celeste leaned too close. She kept glancing toward her own notes, flipping pages with just a bit too much hesitation. Something wasn't sitting right. After the meeting ended, the crowd dispersed quickly, like everyone knew the longer you lingered, the more likely you'd get cited for something. I waited by the exit, casually sipping from a coffee cup I didn't even want. Nina emerged last, arms wrapped tightly around her clipboard. Need a ride home? I asked. She flinched, like I'd yelled it. I live nearby. I know. Just thought we could talk. About my mom. Nina glanced around. No one nearby. Her lips tightened. Not here. Then where? She hesitated, eyes flicking toward her car, then back to me. The old bench, tomorrow morning, early. I nodded. 7 a.m. She gave the faintest nod and hurried off. Her shoulders didn't relax until she was behind the wheel and pulling away. Back at home, Dad was waiting by the shed with a rake in hand. He looked me over once, like he already knew. How'd it go? She's scared, but she knows something. He nodded once. You ready for where this goes? I looked toward the oak. A breeze stirred the branches. The bench below was still, silent. Wait. Yeah, I said. Let's see what they buried. Before we go further, let me ask, have you ever sat through a meeting where you knew the rules were just a cover for control? Drop your story in the comments or let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever dealt with HOA drama, hit that subscribe button, because this story's just heating up. The next morning, I showed up at the bench 15 minutes early. The old oak's branches were slick with dew, and the worn carvings on the bench, L+N 1973, still caught the morning light the way they did when my mom used to run her fingers across them. That spot held history. And now, it was about to hold a secret. Nina showed up right on time. She didn't sit, just stood behind the bench, eyes on the shed like it might explode. We were kids when they started this place, she said quietly. Your mom helped plant half the flowers on this street. Celeste hated that. Because she did it without permission. Because people loved her without needing permission? Nina hugged her clipboard. I didn't sign up for this, Mark. I just wanted to help. You still can, I said. I need to know what's behind all this, and I think you already do. Before she could answer, we both turned to the sound of gravel crunching. Celeste's SUV rolled slowly by. She didn't stop, didn't wave, but she saw us. Nina stiffened. She already suspects me. I didn't try to reassure her. Then it's time we gave her something to really worry about. Later that afternoon, things escalated. I was repairing a loose fence board out back when I heard raised voices coming from the front porch. I stepped around just in time to see Daniel squaring off with Celeste. She stood 2 steps below him, eyes blazing, shouting something about unauthorized construction, but it was what she was holding that stopped me cold. A pistol, not in a holster, in her hand, low by her hip, but visible. Daniel didn't move. That a warning, or are you just too proud to knock like a human being? You're threatening the community, she hissed. I have a right to defend myself. I stepped in between them, arms out. Back off, Celeste, no one hears a threat but you. You've ignored 3 citations, tampered with board records, and encouraged insubordination. Her hand twitched. Don't test me. Dad raised a hand, slow, deliberate, and pointed to the roof camera. Smile for the record. We keep things old school here. She looked up, her face paled just a little. Then she turned and stormed off, muttering something about lawyers. I turned to Dad. You okay? He exhaled. Didn't flinch. That's a good sign. We should report her. To who? She runs the board. Police already think she's the victim thanks to her little whisper campaign. And he was right. The drone flights, the anonymous complaints, the noise about dangerous behavior coming from our address. She'd been seeding doubt for weeks. Still, I called the sheriff's office and reported the incident, calmly and clearly. They sent out a deputy, Officer Jody Kemp, who arrived 2 hours later, clipboard in hand. She was polite, professional, and utterly detached. Did she point the weapon at either of you? She asked. No, I said, but she was on our property, armed and shouting. Jody took notes. Did you feel threatened? I didn't feel safe, I answered. That's enough for a report, isn't it? She nodded. We'll document it, but without footage of the weapon aimed or a direct threat, it's a gray area. Dad just chuckled and walked away. I watched as Officer Kemp scribbled something and tucked it into her folder. After she left, Dad sat by the oak bench again, sharpening a garden tool slowly, like it was therapy. You know what bothers me more than her waving that thing around, he said. What? The silence afterward. Nobody saw a thing. Nobody said a word. He wasn't wrong. The street had gone still. Blinds stayed closed. Even Eli, who usually waved, didn't come out that day. I glanced at the shed, its paint chipping in the corner like it was holding its breath. She's hiding something in those bylaws, Dad, something she's willing to pull a gun over. Then maybe it's time we stop fixing fences, he said, and start breaking into truth. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the scene. Celeste on the porch, pistol in hand, Officer Kemp's cool detachment, the dead silence from every neighbor. It wasn't just fear. It was complicity. I got up around 2 a.m., barefoot and pacing. I passed Dad's room. Empty. Light spilled from the backyard. I stepped outside and found him crouched by the shed with a crowbar. You always work through insomnia with demolition? I asked. He didn't look up. This shed's older than most of the houses here, but Celeste wants it gone. That means there's something here she doesn't want anyone seeing. You think she's hiding something in our shed? No. I think your mother hid something, and Celeste wants it erased. That stopped me. The idea that Mom, quiet, kind, always busy with her garden and compost bins, was somehow wrapped up in this HOA nightmare? I didn't want to believe it. But Daniel had that look again. That Marshal's hunch that had gotten him through shootouts and standoffs. I grabbed a flashlight. The inside of the shed was stacked with boxes I hadn't touched since we moved back. Old Christmas decor, garden tools, dusty canisters of paint. But near the back corner, behind the shelf of rotting pots, the floorboards didn't match. Dad knelt down and ran his fingers along a seam in the wood. Help me. We pried up 3 boards, careful not to splinter them. Beneath, a crawl space, just deep enough for someone to store a few things they didn't want disturbed. We lowered the flashlight. 3 boxes, labeled in my mother's handwriting. One read, 08-1998. Stop this. I froze. Dad reached in and lifted it out. His fingers trembled slightly. First time I'd seen that. We took the box inside and opened it on the kitchen table. The first item was a photo. My mom and Nina standing beside a row of protest signs in front of what looked like an unfinished subdivision sign. Behind them, the same tree still stood, the oak. And on the sign, future site of Whispering Pines, Phase 2 expansion. What is this? I whispered. Dad flipped through the contents, handwritten letters, newspaper clippings, early HOA meeting transcripts, some with signatures that had been scribbled out, others stamped with void. One letter caught our attention. It was addressed to the County Zoning Commission, and it had been returned, unopened, marked "No action taken." She's tried to stop it, Dad said, back when they first tried pushing this HOA through, before it even had teeth. Underneath the stack there was a blueprint, faded and torn at the edges. A lot map, our lot. But it extended further than what we currently owned. There was a second structure marked on the edge. That's the back acre, I said. But that land got cut off after the 2001 rezoning. Dad pointed at a name printed in tiny font at the bottom corner. C. Hardwick, Survey Committee Chair. We sat in silence. This wasn't just about grass length or parking spaces. Celeste had been part of whatever erased that acre, and maybe even erased my mother's fight to stop it. And now that we were back, the shed wasn't just an eyesore, it was evidence. We heard a knock at the door around 6 a.m. I opened it to find Nina, eyes swollen from lack of sleep. She didn't step inside, just handed me a small metal key. She left this in my mailbox years ago, she said. Told me to hold on to it. Said if anything ever happened, you'd know where it belonged. What does it open? Nina swallowed hard. I think the filing cabinet in the HOA storage closet, the one nobody's supposed to touch. She turned and walked away without another word. I stood there, key in hand, as the morning sun filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across the grass. Everything was changing now, not just because we were being hunted, but because we had something worth hunting back with. Daniel appeared beside me, eyes on the key. They buried the truth under cement and bylaws. I nodded slowly. Then it's time we unearth it. Dad stood beside me on the porch, both of us staring at the brass key Nina had just handed over. It was small, old, and heavy. Not just in weight, but in meaning. She didn't explain much, just said it belonged to a filing cabinet in the HOA's storage room. The one nobody's supposed to touch. I turned it over in my hand. She knew, all these years, she knew Mom was fighting something. Dad didn't say anything at first. He just looked out across the yard. Then, she wasn't just planting flowers and organizing bake sales, was she? No, she was digging for truth. And this key might be the map. We didn't rush. We waited. Because if I've learned anything from Dad, it's that timing isn't just a tactic, it's survival. 2 days later, the perfect window opened, a community beautification day organized by the HOA. All board members were scheduled to be out on the street, from 9 to noon, pressure washing sidewalks, repainting curbs, pretending the neighborhood was a brochure. Meanwhile, the clubhouse and office would be left open, for transparency. I slipped in through the side door. The HOA storage room was colder than I expected, full of old trophies from neighborhood chili cook-offs, dusty folding chairs, and 3 locked bins labeled Archive. But in the back, partially hidden under a faded banner, was a metal cabinet. No label, just a padlock. The key slid in perfectly. The click echoed in the quiet. Top drawer, meeting minutes, original drafts, notes in the margins. Nothing like the sanitized PDFs Celeste sent out in emails. But what stopped me cold was a manila folder titled PHASE2/private. Do not distribute. Inside were 2 documents. The first, a formal letter from 2001, supposedly requesting a zoning change. The second, a stamped easement revision that removed the back acre of our property, my family's land, and transferred shared green access to the HOA. Dad was right. They took our land on paper. I scanned the county stamp, smudged, off-center, the signature, C. Hardwick. I snapped photos of everything and locked the drawer like I'd never been there. Back home, I laid it all out on the table. Dad didn't flinch. He just sat, read through it all, and pushed 1 sheet forward. Look at the timeline. Your mom's petition came after this. She tried to stop it. They overrode her. I looked closer. A second form, half burned, was jammed behind the folders, a scanned copy of a neighborhood petition with at least 20 names, including Mom's and Nina's. The words, request to delay Phase 2 vote, were circled in red, with a single handwritten comment scrawled next to it. Reluctant, chaste. Celeste didn't just forge zoning changes, she erased resistance. I stood and walked outside, needing air. The oak tree rustled as I sat on the old bench. I hadn't noticed before, but the initials, L+N, were fainter now, worn by time and weather. Still, they were there. Just like Mom's fight. Just like the land she refused to give up. Dad joined me a moment later. Still think this is about lawn paint? No, I said. It was never about rules. It was about control and burying anyone who questioned it. He handed me a fresh sheet, a legal form. You've got enough to file with the county land office, maybe even more, but before we go nuclear, I nodded. We make sure she can't wiggle out. We get her own people to admit it. That night, I sent Nina an email. We found the documents. I need to meet, but not as an informant, this time as someone who wants to finish what Mom started. No reply for 2 days. Then, finally, potluck night. I'll leave the kitchen door unlocked. Come alone. I showed Dad the message. He gave a short nod, like it all made sense now. Looks like it's her turn to feel the pressure. And just like that, we had our next move. Have you ever found out your family was fighting a battle you didn't even know existed? Let me know where you're watching from, and if you've ever uncovered something your community tried to hide, hit subscribe, because what we're about to do next will shake everything loose. The night of the Whispering Pines monthly potluck arrived with a humid stillness. Porch lights flicked on across the street like nothing was wrong. Children chased each other past trimmed hedges. Crock-pots of overcooked meatballs and gluten-free pies sat on folding tables under string lights. A Norman Rockwell painting with a rotten frame. But I wasn't there for small talk. I was there for Nina. Celeste stood near the gazebo, holding court like a senator at a fundraiser. Every laugh from her circle felt rehearsed. But I kept my distance, moving casually down the side of Nina's house. Her kitchen door, just as she promised, was cracked open. I slipped inside. The room smelled like cinnamon and lemon oil, too clean. Nina stood at the sink facing away, her back tense, as if even her shadow might betray her. You came alone, she said quietly, still not turning. You knew I would. She finally looked over her shoulder. Her expression had changed, less guilt, more resolve. But her hand still trembled as she reached into a flour tin and pulled out a thumb drive wrapped in foil. I wasn't brave when your mom needed me, she said, but I can't let Celeste bury her twice. I took the drive and nodded. What's on it? Board meeting audio logs. Celeste made me record them. For record keeping, she said, but one of them, April 3rd, 2001, you'll want to hear that one. She stepped closer. Her voice dropped. They voted to rezone the back acre in a private session. No community approval. Your mother called it out the next day. The petition? She handed it in the same week. Celeste had it shredded. I only saved a copy because your mom begged me to. Nina, why now? I asked. Why not before? She looked away, eyes glassy. Because she threatened my job, my husband's. I was scared. I still am. She pulled a gun on my father last week. That stopped her. She said it was for protection, but we both know what she's protecting. Nina closed her eyes, took a shaky breath, and nodded. Use it, whatever's on there. Use it before she finds another way to silence the past. I tucked the drive into my jacket just as laughter erupted outside. Celeste's voice rang through the yard, sugar-coated and smug. Let's give a big round of applause for our treasurer, Nina Wheeler. 12 years of quiet dedication. Nina didn't move. I don't think I can face her, she whispered. You just did, I said. Now let me finish it. I slipped back out the door and circled the property to avoid attention. Dad was waiting by the car, leaning casually against the hood with his arms crossed. Well, he asked. I held up the drive. We've got her, on tape, all the way back to the beginning. He opened the passenger door. Then it's time to stop documenting and start building the case. Back home, we plugged the drive into Dad's laptop. The file, labeled APR 321 WAP, clicked to life. At first, just shuffling papers, chairs scraping. Then Celeste's voice, clipped and confident. I move to approve the emergency reclassification of Parcel 47B for board-assigned use. Someone else. Shouldn't we wait for a community vote? Celeste, we'll present it as pre-approved. We've already submitted the draft to zoning. Let's keep this clean. The recording fizzled briefly, then cut to her laughing. She'll never let this go. That woman treats her land like a diary. My jaw clenched. That was my mom she was talking about. Her land. Her fight. Daniel leaned back. That's conspiracy, backdated filings, zoning fraud. She just wrote her own resignation letter. But I wasn't smiling yet. Let's be smart, I said. We build the timeline, pull every forged vote, every suppressed complaint, then we bring it all out in one swing. He grinned, the Marshal way. I looked out the window toward the oak. Wind rustled the branches. This wasn't just personal anymore. This was legacy. We didn't sleep that night, not out of fear, those days were gone, but because we were done reacting. Now it was time to strike. The audio recording alone wasn't enough. We needed a complete picture. Forged documents, suppressed petitions, false minutes, and we needed people. Real neighbors who'd been stepped on by Celeste and her clipboard mafia and were finally ready to talk. Who else do we have besides Nina? I asked Dad, sipping cold coffee as the sun cracked through the kitchen blinds. Eli, he replied, and if we give Lucas Tran something real, he'll come around. He'll watching, I can feel it. I nodded. Then we build the trap. That afternoon, I typed up a 2-page summary of what we'd found. Audio transcript excerpts, dates of the forged filings, and a copy of the 2001 petition with my mother's signature circled in red. Dad called in a favor from a friend of his, retired judge, now a legal advisor. Just a phone call, no paper trail, but what he gave us was gold. You want to push this through clean, Dad said, hanging up? You'll need 3 things: proof of damages, a record of systematic abuse, and confirmation from a current board member. We've got all 3. But to seal it, we make them say it out loud. How? I asked. He looked up from his notepad. We bait the conversation. Celeste loves control. We give her the illusion of it, get her talking. We record it legally on our own property. So that's what we did. We planted a mic in the front flower bed and re-angled our front security camera to catch the driveway and porch. Then we sent her a letter, not a threat, not a complaint, just a courtesy notification that we'd be bringing our shed up for discussion at the next meeting, citing new evidence. It didn't take long. 2 days later, she was on our porch just after sunset, hair sprayed and blazer buttoned like she was walking into court. She smiled tight-lipped and stepped up without waiting for an invitation. I received your note, she said sweetly. Would have appreciated a direct conversation, Mark. This neighborhood thrives on communication. I nodded. Then let's communicate. Dad stood behind me, silent but present. She glanced his way, then refocused on me. This evidence you mentioned. You're not seriously thinking of bringing old rumors into a board meeting, are you? No rumors, just board minutes, audio logs, zoning documents, and the petition my mother filed, 21 signatures, including your own treasurer. Her eyes flickered. Out of context, old records can be very misleading. Then context is all I'm asking for, just some clarity. She stepped closer, lowered her voice. Let me give you clarity, Mark. What your mother started, it ended for a reason. She didn't understand how things work around here. The HOA is what keeps this place from falling apart. She understood just fine, I said calmly. She just didn't believe fear was a substitute for leadership. That one landed. Her jaw twitched, but she kept her voice light. You think you're going to get the community on your side? You'll find loyalty runs deep in these streets. Dad stepped forward now, his voice measured. Let's hope so, because the only thing deeper than loyalty is guilt. Celeste stiffened, then turned, heels snapping on the porch wood. Good luck with your little crusade. The door shut behind her. I turned to Dad. Did we get it? He pointed at the camera. We got everything. That night, we backed up the recording, the video, the audio logs, and every scanned document into 3 separate drives. One went in my safety deposit box. One went to Dad's lawyer friend. The third stayed on us. This wasn't about revenge. Not anymore. This was about proof. About voice. About standing on the land my mother fought for with something stronger than fists or fines. It was time to stop hoping the system worked. It was time to prove it didn't and make it answer for that. 3 days after Celeste's little porch visit, the HOA sent out a surprise announcement. Tucked inside everyone's mailbox was a pale blue flyer. Emergency Board Vote Community Meeting this Saturday. Topic: Rule 14 Due-On and Member Conduct Review. No explanation, no context, just enough legalese to keep the average homeowner from asking too many questions. But I knew exactly what it meant. She's trying to flip it on us, I said, holding the flyer up for Dad. Rule 14D1 covers member threats or actions deemed disruptive to board operations. She's prepping an expulsion. He didn't even look up from sharpening his pocket knife. She's swinging first, that means she's off balance. Still, we weren't taking chances. That night, I emailed every resident I'd quietly spoken to. Eli, Lucas, 3 others who had quietly dropped notes in our mailbox over the last few weeks. I sent them a timeline of what we'd uncovered, a link to the audio from 2001, and a call to show up at the vote. We didn't need them to speak. We just needed them to watch. The morning of the meeting, Dad and I arrived 15 minutes early. The clubhouse was already buzzing. Folding chairs had been arranged in a loose semicircle, with Celeste seated at the head like a judge presiding over a sentencing. Nina sat off to the side, noticeably pale, her clipboard in her lap but untouched. Celeste gave us a tight nod as we walked in. Gentlemen, please find your seats. This won't take long. I looked around. More people had shown than expected. Not just the board, but residents. Some I hadn't even spoken to. Word was spreading. You could feel it. Celeste called the meeting to order with the kind of confidence only someone rehearsing in front of a mirror twice a day could muster. We are here to review a serious breach of conduct involving board challenges, unauthorized documentation collection, and aggressive confrontation toward board leadership. She didn't name me, but she didn't have to. Per the bylaws, she continued, we reserve the right to motion for revocation of voting privileges and removal from the community association pending a majority vote. Before she could continue, I raised my hand. She stared at it like it was a fly in her soup. This isn't a Q&A, Mr. Ralston. No, but it is a public meeting, and I'd like the minutes to reflect what's about to be presented. I opened my folder and pulled out a copy of the forged zoning letter, one of several we'd backed up. Before any votes are cast, I'd like the board to explain this document. It was submitted under your signature, Celeste, April 2001. This version includes a fake county stamp and contradicts actual zoning records we acquired last week. Gasps rippled through the crowd. One of the newer board members leaned forward, squinting at the page. Celeste stayed composed. That document has no bearing on this meeting. You're attempting to hijack the agenda. I'm attempting to correct the record, I shot back. And if we're discussing member conduct, let's talk about conduct that cost this community its legal transparency. Nina shifted in her seat. Her hand moved slowly to her clipboard, then she froze. Go on, Nina, I said. Tell them what was on the thumb drive. Celeste turned, voice tight. Nina, you are not authorized. Nina stood. Her voice was quiet, but steady. There's something wrong. The drive's empty. I checked this morning. Everything's gone. My stomach dropped. What? I opened it in the office before the meeting. It was wiped. No files. Celeste smiled, but only for a flash. Dad leaned in. She knew. She's been one step ahead. No, I whispered. She's been watching Nina. Before I could react, Celeste slammed her gavel down. Motion on the table. All in favor of stripping voting privileges from the Ralston household, raise your hands. 3 board members immediately lifted their arms. Then, silence. Nina didn't move, neither did 2 others. And across the room from the back row, Eli Granger stood up. I vote no, he said, and I'm not even on your board. But I own a share of this community, and you don't get to erase people anymore. Murmurs echoed. One woman clapped once, awkwardly, but didn't stop. Celeste's grip on the gavel tightened. And I smiled. She'd buried the files, but she couldn't bear the room. Ever seen someone try to erase the truth and fail in front of a crowd? Let me know where you're watching from, and if you've ever witnessed an HOA overstep its bounds, drop your story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe. The next move? Eli's voice still echoed in the room when Celeste slammed the gavel a second time, harder this time, as if noise could undo what just happened, but the damage was done. She couldn't erase that moment. Not from the board, not from the residents, and not from the dozen phones I saw subtly recording from laps and pockets. Dad leaned toward me, low voice. That was the shift. She's bleeding trust. We didn't wait for the rest of the meeting. There was no need. Celeste postponed the vote pending legal review, which meant she lost control and she knows it. Outside, neighbors didn't just walk past us. They nodded. One woman even whispered, "She's been doing this for years." Finally, someone said it. I didn't need applause, but I did need momentum. The next morning, I took the printed version of our timeline, the one we'd shared privately, and stapled a fresh page on top. What they don't want you to know about Whispering Pines. Then I printed 40 copies, tucked them in plain white envelopes, and dropped one at every doorstep before 7 a.m. By noon, 3 more neighbors had emailed me. 2 sent supporting documents, old fines, complaint forms that were ignored, backyard drone photos. Another just said, "About time someone stood up." But what I wasn't ready for was Lucas Tran. He showed up on our porch with a manila folder under one arm and a small audio recorder in his hand. "I didn't know your mom," he said, "but I've seen the way Celeste treats people. I've got proof she threatened to block my fence permit unless I voted her way last year. Told me straight out it would be a shame if my mailbox ended up on the review list. I recorded it." He handed me the recorder. It was her voice, crystal clear. "Don't forget who approves the budgets around here, Lucas. You want that privacy fence, you vote accordingly." That wasn't just intimidation, that was extortion. I stared at him. "Why now?" He gave a half smile. "Because when Eli stood up, I realized we weren't alone." I shook his hand. "You just gave us a bulletproof case." That evening I compiled everything. Lucas's recording, our zoning docs, the scrubbed drive, Celeste's porch comments from the hidden mic, and laid them out in a presentation. Not fancy, just facts, one truth at a time. Nina called just after dinner. "She's panicking," she said. "Celeste called a private session for the remaining board members. She's trying to get ahead of whatever she thinks you're about to do. She's right to be nervous." She also said if any board member leaks internal information, she'll sue. She looked right at me when she said it. I didn't speak for a moment. "Then, you still with us?" There was a pause. "I'm done hiding." After she hung up, I stepped outside and sat under the oak. Dad joined me with a beer in hand. "You feel that?" I nodded. "It's like the air shifted. She's losing the story, and once that happens, she can't claw it back." He lifted his bottle. "To roots that hold." I tapped mine against his. "To echoes that reach farther than threats." The next morning, I filed an official complaint with the county zoning board and submitted our evidence packet, including the original petition with my mother's name highlighted in gold ink. Then I scheduled one more thing, a formal request to speak at the next HOA community meeting. This time, I wasn't asking for time. I was taking it because the truth wasn't just spreading, it was organizing. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for a Thursday evening. Same clubhouse, same plastic chairs, but this time, something was different. You could feel it before you even walked in. My neighbors didn't just trickle in quietly. They came early, talking, pointing at documents, whispering to each other in tight huddles. Celeste tried to smile, to hold that same smug composure, but her posture betrayed her. She sat more rigid, her clipboard gripped like a shield instead of a prop. Dad and I arrived right on time. I brought a black presentation folder, 3 USB drives, and a printed summary of everything we'd uncovered. Nina was already seated near the front, and when our eyes met, she gave the faintest nod. Lucas sat just behind her, arms crossed, recorder visible in his jacket pocket. Letting her see it, I walked to the front when the floor opened for resident comments. "Mark Ralston," Celeste said, barely glancing up. 2 minutes. I didn't sit, I didn't clear my throat, I just started talking. 24 years ago, my mother, Linda Ralston, signed a petition alongside 20 other residents asking this board to delay Phase 2 construction. That petition disappeared, along with meeting minutes, original zoning maps, and half the voices on this street. The room went quiet. No fidgeting, no coughs, just silence. I held up the folder. We recovered forged zoning letters, audio of private board sessions approving land grabs without community votes, witness testimony, and yes, your voice, Ms. Hardwick, encouraging board members to suppress records and leverage votes with threats. Celeste scoffed. "You've made a lot of bold claims with nothing more than..." I clicked a remote. The audio started playing through the small speaker I'd placed on the table. Celeste's voice. "She treats her land like a diary. We'll present it as pre-approved. Let's keep this clean." Gasps, audible now. Eli muttered something. Someone in the back said, "That's her." The audio kept going. Celeste again. "Don't forget who approves the budgets around here, Lucas. You vote accordingly. She stood. This is an ambush. This is a reckoning, I said, and this room deserves the full truth. I handed the printed packet to each board member. Documents, photos, audio transcript summaries. No threats, just facts, simple and heavy. One board member, Karen Morales, stood up. I joined last year. I didn't sign up for this. I motioned to open a full investigation. Seconded, Nina said, standing too. Celeste raised her voice. This is a witch hunt built on paranoia and manipulated media. No, Dad said, finally speaking from the back of the room. This is a legacy that wouldn't stay buried. He stepped forward slowly. You pulled a gun on my property. You tried to erase what my wife built, what my son rebuilt, and what this community deserved to know. But we're still here, and now they know. Celeste froze. Her mouth opened once, then shut. She sat back down, slower this time, deflated. Karen turned to the others, all in favor of suspending Celeste Hardwick pending audit results. Hands went up, Nina's, Karen's, two others, even one I didn't recognize. Celeste didn't raise hers. But the damage was done. She stood without another word, grabbed her clipboard and left through the side door like a storm cloud with no rain left in it. The moment she was gone, it felt like someone cracked a window in the room. The tension didn't vanish, but it started to shift. Neighbors looked around like they were waking up from a long, quiet nightmare. After the meeting, people shook hands. Lucas gave me a firm nod. Eli handed me a folded piece of paper. A copy of his denied shed permit, dated the same month as Celeste's vote on our land. Thought you might want this for your scrapbook, he said. Nina stayed behind to collect the meeting materials, but as I left she whispered one thing. She was never afraid of the law, she was afraid of the moment we'd all look at her at once. And now we had. The next morning everything was still. No letters taped to the front door, no drones buzzing overhead, no Celeste pacing the sidewalk in her blazer like a general inspecting her troops. Just birdsong, a breeze off the lake, and the sound of my father raking the gravel along the side of the house. The suspension was official. Karen Morales emailed me at 6:30, I am imming. Celeste had been placed on administrative leave pending a full audit, and the board would meet next week to appoint an interim president. It wasn't a full takedown, but it was enough. Dad found me out back by the shed. I was repainting it. Not to match community palette regulations, but because the place deserved to shine again. I used the same color my mom had used in '94, a light teal that always stood out in spring. She'd like that, he said, watching me stroke the final coat across the trim. Never cared much for beige anyway. I think she'd like what we did too. He nodded. Then he handed me something wrapped in a dish towel. I opened it carefully. The bench plaque. The one we'd taken down after the first HOA threat letter last fall. It read, Linda Ralston's Place of Peace. Dad just said, time to put it back. We walked together to the old oak, that familiar canopy of memory and grit. The bench was weathered but sturdy, and the bark still bore the faint scars of initials carved long ago. L+N 1973. As I screwed the plaque back into place, I realized this wasn't just about vindication. It was about restoration. About letting something breathe again that had been stifled too long. Later that afternoon, Nina stopped by with banana bread and a file folder labeled Board Reforms Draft. Karen asked me to help rebuild the charter, she said a little sheepishly. It's not a revolution, but it's a start. You deserve a fresh start, too. She smiled. I still hear her sometimes, your mom. When I walk by the garden, she used to hum when she pulled weeds. I remember. She said weeds were just things no one gave permission to bloom. Nina blinked hard, then just nodded and left the bread on the porch. By sunset, the community felt lighter. Kids played soccer in the cul-de-sac without glancing over their shoulders. Lucas repaired the fence Celeste once threatened to sight. Eli sat on his porch with a glass of bourbon and no paperwork in sight. For the first time since moving back, I felt like I wasn't defending something. I was living in it. That night, Dad and I sat by the fire pit, watching flames flicker up against the sky. You know, I said when she pulled that gun on you. I thought we were going to lose everything. He didn't look over, just sipped his beer. She didn't pull a gun, she pulled desperation. That never wins. I thought about that. about mom, about the oak, about what roots do when you try to cut them too shallow. Then I looked around and saw neighbors sitting on their porches, lights warm, doors open. "She built something," I said, "and we kept it standing." He finally looked at me. "Justice doesn't shout, son. It just waits long enough to be heard." Have you ever stood your ground against someone in power who thought they could silence you? Tell me where you're watching from, or share your HOA story in the comments. I read every one. Because sometimes the smallest act of resistance is the beginning of a legacy. And you're not alone in this fight. Not anymore,